Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another You Made Simple live stream. It's an honor to have you, and today in actual physical manifestation, no longer just sitting in my bedroom, talking about EU politics. Actually at a Congress, the European Democratic Party's Congress, and with a very special guest. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience that isn't familiar with you?
I would love to. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much. My name is Chirs Mowrey. I'm 23 years old, even though I look like I'm 17, maybe. But the baby face has, well,
Grow a beard.
maybe it'll do me justice when I'm 40.
Yeah.
But I live in the United States, and I essentially spend all my time posting on TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, everything about politics, and essentially how Donald Trump sucks. He's the worst. I started doing this 2 or 3 years ago, and lucky enough to do it full time now.
Right.
Just posting about the news and kind of what's going on. So yeah, that's
Very
me.
good. So it's definitely US politics focused.
Yes, I'd say almost 100%. Although because
Yeah.
Donald Trump is consistently, uh, ruining our friendships around the world.
Right.
I've spent enormous amounts of time talking about
Yeah.
the bad things he's doing around the world and treating other world leaders like shit. So
Yeah.
sorry
Okay.
sorry for the curse.
Oh, you can. It's fine. I mean, we're on adult audience here.
That's right.
So I think I want to get into the first question because today is really in the topic of democracy. And maybe it might be an obvious question, but do you see the United States as a polarized society? And why do you see that? Or if not?
Sure. Yeah, I'd say 100% yes. I think that right now the United States is the most polarized or divided that it's been probably since the Civil War, which
Okay.
I know that's pretty intense. The U.S. Civil War was in 1861 to 1865, I believe.
It's literally the country fighting each other.
Right,
Right.
right.
Very
So,
intense.
right. But yeah, it's incredibly polarized, and it's truly based on a lot of different factors, uh, become almost, two, maybe three or four at times, separate worlds, all kind of living in different realities with
Yeah.
this kind of disinformation war.
Yep.
A lot of people who view politics now as it's so incredibly divisive, losing family members, losing friends. It's very intense right now.
Yeah, very intense. So exactly what you just described, we'd be very interested to know. Um, to many Europeans, this sounds like as extreme. Like, how would you explain this level of polarization? How did you get here to someone from our continent?
Wow, that's a really great question. How did we get here? Well, look,
Yeah,
I think that the reality is this, and I'm 23, so I think that someone who's a bit older than me might
yeah,
have a slightly different answer, and that's okay.
yeah.
But the reality here becomes that the United States has spent 3 or 4 or 5 decades with leaders who are often viewed as um, uh, sorry,
It's very distracting.
no,
I
no, no,
know.
no,
Yeah,
no. It's no
yeah,
worries. It's no worries. I apologize. For 3 or 4 or 5 decades, and there's obviously some nuance here. A lot of politicians have. There's been a lot of Americans that feel like politicians don't work for them. They're
right.
not serving for them. It's kind of been a culture of building, really mainly over the last 20 years or so, of people saying politicians are all in it for themselves. They're
Right.
all getting really rich. The wealth gap is increasing in a lot, and we see politicians having nice houses and having a bunch of money,
Right.
while kind of the standard American makes the same amount of money, but everything gets more expensive. And this is over 20 or 30 years. Enter somebody like Donald Trump, who is
Right.
able to kind of look at an entire country and say, I'm not the Democrats, I'm not the Republicans, I'm me, and I actually care about you. And
I
even
see.
though he's like a liar, he was able to essentially take a lot of people who are already feeling unheard and latch them onto this movement.
Okay.
And so then come to now, and I'll answer
Yeah.
your question,
Yeah.
which is how do we get so polarized? For a lot of Americans, Donald Trump, we've always seen him for what he is. He's
Yeah.
a narcissist. He's a liar. He's polarizing. He says incredibly hateful things about frankly Americans, Democrats, but also like the LGBTQ plus community and a lot
Sure.
of disenfranchised groups. And so people who latched onto Donald Trump, who see him as practically king,
Yeah.
versus kind of the other half of America that instantly saw Donald Trump for what he was, which is this very hateful individual. Create now we're in current day America where those
Yeah.
two sides are very, very fierce
Yeah.
and convinced that they're on the right side.
Yeah, and completely fortified in there, or like dug in their heels, so to say.
Correct.
Yeah. So maybe another part of that that it hasn't really been mentioned yet is the very fact that it's not only rhetoric, right? It doesn't really stay with statements, even though they are very divisive and add to the polarization, like you said. Um, I'm very curious about your insights maybe on democratic backsliding. I'm sure you're familiar with the term. Um, do you see this happening within the current administration? Is there like a specific example that you could maybe name?
Yeah, actually, in that, could you give me your definition of
Sure.
backsliding?
I could. So I want to say that at any moment of time, you have a certain percentage almost of democracy of like because there's nowhere there's a pure democracy where it's absolutely 100% perfect, but you have these ratings around the world, democracy indexes, what have you.
Got it.
Once you start taking steps back from the current score or whatever value we put to it,
You slide down.
you slide back.
Got it.
Right. So
Got it.
that's what I would call democratic backsliding,
Got it.
and like specific actions would be, I don't know, censoring media, reforms in the judicial system that make it less independent, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, 110% yes. I think
Good.
I've, and I don't know the exact definitions here, but sometimes I would call America right now moving into, if not, it's already kind of gearing towards this mode of pseudo democracy, where
Okay.
on the surface it may
Yep.
appear that we have these institutions that are that we have checks and balances. The media is independent and all these things, but in reality, right now, the American government, the executive branch,
Yep.
Donald Trump, it's operating in a way that we have never seen in modern American history.
Okay.
It's hyper politicized. We are
Yes.
seeing basically the president with wielding more power than he really has in a long time. And so a lot of independent agencies, like for us, the Department of Justice
Yes.
or the FBI, these agencies that are largely independent from the presidency and have a lot of checks and balances around being hyper political, have become all of a sudden extremely hyper political. So we see Donald Trump utilizing these agencies to go after his political opponents.
Could we maybe like to expand on that? Like I would love to maybe dive into any specific example that comes to
Okay,
mind,
yeah.
like something concrete. That's what
Yeah,
I know our viewers.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
fantastic,
Yep.
fantastic. So recently, James Comey was
Yep.
indicted. James Comey is the former FBI director in the
Yes.
United
Yeah. Yeah.
States.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, and incredibly unprecedented for an individual like that to be indicted. The person, it's appearing like, as of right now, that case is going to be thrown out.
Okay.
Why? Because the person that indicted him, she has never tried a criminal case ever. She has only worked insurance law.
Okay.
And when most people see that, if you're a reasonable human being, you go, wow, somebody somebody leading the prosecutor in this case,
Yep.
never trying the political case, never trying, excuse me, a criminal case. This is one of the most high profile criminal cases in the country. Why
Yeah.
is this happening?
Yeah.
Because the last two prosecutors resigned because they said there's not enough evidence to indict James Comey.
Yeah.
And the president said, you're going to do it or you're going to get
You're
out.
going to find the evidence.
That doesn't happen. That does not happen in the United States. And so we learned literally this week, she, secures the indictment of James Comey. We learned that this week that a judge came out and said she was essentially uh, lying to the grand jury about
Okay.
what the evidence was. She was misleading them. She was doing these things that are so like fun. Any like kind of lawyer just out of law school
Yeah.
who's trying criminal cases would know not to do.
Okay.
She
Yeah.
had no idea what she was doing. And I think that that's a really great example of, again, why is the reason James Comey is being indicted is
Yeah.
because Donald Trump says, go after my political opponents.
Okay. Okay. Very clear. I want to address the audience for a second here. If you guys have any specific questions, make sure to @eMadeSimple in the chat so I can more easily see your comments and questions. I'll be diving into them shortly, but right now we have a few more questions left that I would love to go through. So we spoke about democratic backsliding there, and you gave us a very nice example. And to continue on that route, I was very curious: is there in the previous Trump presidency, a lot was spoken about guardrails. I'm sure you're very familiar with all the talking points there. Um, in your opinion, which guardrails are the ones that are currently the most under threat? Like, what is the most pressing issue,
Yep.
in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, I think that in the first administration, I bring up this stat a lot. 40 of Donald Trump's 44 cabinet members from
Yep.
his first administration did not endorse him for a second one.
Right.
The large majority of the people that were in the White House or very high up in the executive branch, you know, didn't endorse him, left, or said scathing, horrible things about him. They
Right.
said, he's a wannabe dictator. He doesn't care about anybody but himself. He doesn't know anything about foreign policy. Some of the quotes from these individuals are truly stunning. And so we enter, Trump V2. A lot of the guardrails from, number one, were these individuals in the executive branch who, if Donald Trump gave an order, like,
Yep.
go prosecute my political opponents,
Yeah.
somebody was going to say, That's unconstitutional. That,
Right.
that I don't, absolutely not. That's not, that's anti-American or unconstitutional. Now, Donald Trump has filled not only his White House, but these agencies
Right.
with loyalists, with people who fundamentally the only question that's asked, and it's a good example to the last point of, you said the prosecutor who has literally only ever done insurance law.
Yeah.
The only question on that application was, will you be loyal to Donald Trump? Check, yes, you're in. There's no other requirements there. And so I'd say the most dangerous thing that I talk most often about is that's that rising executive authority where
Yeah.
these three that are agencies and the people who are in the White House who would normally be loyal to the Constitution
Yes.
are being quickly replaced and are loyal to Donald Trump. And that's a guardrail that kept him so often from doing, frankly, crazy shit in his first term that no longer exists.
Right. So there's a massive difference between his first and second term in that
Correct.
regard.
Correct.
And maybe I'm curious to hear your reflections as well. Where is it the case as well that maybe he knows a bit more now? I mean, he tested quite a few things, but
Right.
now you know where to go.
100%. 100%. I think that he, in his first term, and there's, some nuance here because I actually think that Donald Trump is facing some serious, potentially some serious cognitive decline
Right.
here as
Yeah.
an almost 80-year-old, but he certainly knows more. He understands what he needs to do. He has people, he's been prepping for this, all throughout the campaign, which is when I get in, I'm not letting any of these people stop me. Again,
Okay.
we saw on day one, he signed an executive order called Schedule F. I would argue it gave him, the president, for the first time really in modern American history, and the ability to mass fire these political public servants and and fire them and replace them with loyalists. Again, like
Yep.
back to like the,
Yep.
the
Yep. Yep.
biggest guardrail that's missing. So I think Donald Trump has been prepping for this moment. He knows what he needs to do, as opposed to last time where he was giving orders, and a lot
Yep.
of people in his White House were saying, "I'm not going to do it."
Okay. Thank you. I see a nice comment. Faithful8271. Thank you for your question. I will come to that shortly. It's a very good one, and I'm sure you'll have an opinion. I'll tell you shortly.
I have many opinions.
Yeah. But as we are an EU channel, we are always interested to kind of take it more global because it's very been domestically focused on US politics. Before this, you told me that you have been looking a little bit at how Trump behaves to his allies, and I kind of want to reflect a little bit more on that. I'm curious to see, is the European Union mentioned at all in any of the United States media or any of the press conference? And kind of what is the vibe, to use
Sure.
for the lack of a better term there?
Sure.
Is it mentioned? How is the EU mentioned? And maybe how do you view the relationship between both?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's a great question, and again, I'm really thankful to be here. This is the first time I've left the United States, which
That's
kind of
very interesting as well, by the way.
yeah, I know. But yeah, I mean, it is mentioned in media. I think that the main vibe, the main takeaway consistently that I hear from people is that a lot of Americans view allies as, just they quite grasp the importance. And I think it's often talked about in media, especially right-wing circles,
Interesting.
as, oh, we're constantly the only reason they exist is because of us.
Yes.
We're the
Okay.
most important thing in the world. The kind of media churn ends up being, well, we don't, any foreign aid we're supplying doesn't need to go there, or
Okay.
or just Europe as a whole, even though there's no reality to this,
Yeah.
leeches off the United States, that we
Yeah.
need to isolate ourselves more. And I see that as a consistent vibe. I think because of that, and because of what Donald Trump has done, obviously, we've really tossed in the dumpster so many of our allies that we have
Yeah.
built over, like 70 or 80 years.
Yeah.
And I'd say that the relationship now between wherever in Europe or even our, closest neighbors in Canada and
Yes.
Mexico is
Exactly.
severely strained.
Yeah.
It's awful, and it makes sense. And so a lot of, I think, I try to scream and yell that, please God, can we move on from this guy and bring in Americans who know how valuable these allies are and don't, treat them like garbage.
Yeah. So maybe to expand on that, because I think it is, I think this question by one of our viewers actually does fit very well. The person asks, what do you both think about the recent peace plan? I think referring to the Ukrainian peace plan. And does it show that Trump just wants to leave Europe?
That's a good question. Well,
Let's start first with what you think about the plan itself,
yeah,
if you're familiar with
yeah.
it.
Are we
Yeah.
referring to, because there's been a little bit of a 180 in Donald Trump's position here,
Yeah. Okay.
and
Yeah.
I've kind of struggled in some ways to keep up. I understand that. Well, first of all, I think that at any level we're bending the knee to Vladimir Putin, who
Right.
Trump is frankly in bed with, is a disaster. I think that the way that we were approaching this before Donald Trump was great. I think, having there's some nuance here as well, but having red lines and saying that, we're not going to come to the
Yeah.
table and have negotiations with a wannabe dictator. We're not going to roll out the red carpet for him in
Right.
Alaska. If you want to talk about peace, then you need to stop committing war crimes, and come to the table. But there's not going to be a negotiation about we're not giving up land here. We're going to
Yeah.
continue to fight this tooth and nail and have our allies aligned.
Yeah.
Obviously, Donald Trump now is different.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's,
the peace plan that I guess.
he presented the 28, I think 28 points right now,
Oh,
something like
right.
that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. 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 Again, I think so much of the problem for Donald Trump is always execution. He will
Okay.
come up with, we hear so often from Trump or the United States that, here's this plan for anything, even
Yeah.
internationally, that's come together. And the United States is going to be some key part of it, and it
Yeah.
quickly falls apart.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that off the top of my head, I'm familiar enough with
Yeah.
28 points.
The points definitely. I think the biggest ones are, and I mean, if you're asking me for my opinion, I will come to it in a second. But
Please.
the biggest ones are ceding territory in the Donbas region, so Donetsk and Luhansk. That is completely like
Un-
proper Russian territory now.
Unacceptable.
Crimea also goes through Russia,
Unacceptable.
and currently the lines of the front line, they get frozen in Kherson, and it will stay there basically. That is one. Also very difficult for Ukraine to accept already. The second part is Ukraine is to limit its military in many ways. I think the current active personnel that are allowed is 600,000 under this plan, so that is significantly smaller. And no NATO, but the kind of opposite side would be you get kind of a maybe towards European Union membership, and you get a investment plan by the United States, maybe led by Donald Trump himself.
I would say again, I every single point practically you listed
Yeah.
totally and completely unacceptable and garbage. Again, I
Yeah.
think you're bending the knee to a wannabe dictator. I think Donald Trump has been in bed with people like Vladimir Putin for a long time, and it's. I think the best way to describe it often is disgraceful. It's disgraceful. It's
Yeah.
disgraceful to do
Okay.
to our allies. It's disgraceful for the way that the United States is currently operating. And I think the biggest thing I try to get out there is that a lot of Americans feel the same way.
I see. Well, it's a very, very strong opinion for sure, and I mean, I can't say that I disagree as well. The same thing is we see the same thing happening with, I don't know if you're familiar with Viktor Orban, leader currently of Hungary. And very recently in the news, it was the fact that Trump would bail out or financially bail out Viktor Orban's regime when it comes to sanctions of the European Union or any other reprisals. So it's not just that he is in bed, as you so succinctly put it, with Vladimir Putin, the wannabe dictator. It is also that he is supporting his kind of maybe allies or like political allies that kind of align with him in Europe as well.
100%. And
Yep.
and frankly, I think Donald Trump, as someone who is a narcissist, he looks up to individuals like this.
Right.
He looks
Okay.
up to people like Vladimir Putin, and maybe he won't admit it out loud, but it's very clear from the people we heard from who have always been very close to Donald Trump, or at least were in his first term, that yeah,
Yep.
he talks about people like Viktor Orban or Vladimir Putin or even Kim Jong Un with some amount of fondness. He believes
Right.
I think he said on several occasions they lead with such strength, which almost kind of praising them at points. And again, I agree with that. That we're seeing this like almost. I'm trying so hard, hoping it doesn't get to this point, but really, obviously, starting to see this shift where the United States is aligning themselves with really like these
Yep.
kind of authoritarian areas.
Yeah. So I mean, it does fit very well with one of the questions from our viewers. User Daan Schravendijk asks, if Trump goes for a third term, do you think the public and the government institution will allow it or stand up against
So
it?
that's a really good. Who asked that question?
Daan
Okay,
Schravendijk.
well,
We'll call him Daan.
thank you so much. Great question. Oh, that's a good question. And I've been talking to a lot of times I'll debate on TikTok
Sure. Yeah.
Trump supporters when I don't know, I'm bored, I guess. And it's fascinating to see. I think that I'd like to believe that the
Yeah.
institutions that we currently have in place would not allow him to run for a third term. That
Okay.
whatever loophole that they are attempting to come up with right
Yeah.
now, which some of his very closest allies like Steve Bannon have said they're working on and they believe they will be successful with.
Yep.
I'd like to believe fundamentally that that is not possible. However, with that being said, I I also hear from even a lot of staunch Trump supporters that okay, if he ran for a third term, I'd be out.
Okay.
I don't
Yeah.
believe them.
No.
I don't because they said they'd be. Donald Trump was raiding on January 6th, sending a mob of his supporters essentially to try to chanting "Kill Mike Pence, kill the vice president," trying to overthrow elections he
Stop
didn't
the
win.
certification of the vote.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Stop the certification of the vote.
Yeah.
And that apparently wasn't enough.
Okay.
So I put all of my faith, and again, this isn't super hopeful, in the current institutions to believe that he wouldn't do that.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I'd like to believe that a lot of independents in the United States certainly would be appalled. But there is a group right now in the United States that, again, is looking that I think actually would not mind or look somewhat fondly to a third term from Donald Trump, because I think they don't believe in democracy.
Right. Well, that is well, at least from this side of the pond, I would really hope that doesn't happen.
I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
I'm trying really hard. I'm
No,
sorry. I'm
I'm good.
sorry. I'm
I mean, I
sorry.
guess we'll have to see with the midterms, right?
Yeah.
See
Right. Well,
how it
listen,
does.
right now, I will say this. I will say this. Sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
But Donald Trump is polling right now the most unpopular he's ever been, first or second term. And
Interesting. Yep.
and we just had a wave of kind of smaller elections in the United States
Yep.
2 weeks ago, and it was historic for Democrats.
Yeah.
And really, there's an immense amount of political pressure on Donald Trump right now that we haven't seen in a long time. I'd say akin to right after January 6th. There was a lot of people abandoning him. Now,
Yeah, right.
obviously, we saw what ended up happening.
Yeah.
But I do have faith right now, at least the direction we're moving, that there is some momentum here, and that we can stop this before it gets, even worse.
Out of hand. Right. So maybe towards the end of this interview, I ask once again, if you have any pressing questions, please make sure to ask them now. But I would be very curious to hear kind of your reflection on, and if you're not familiar, that's fine, I understand. But if you're like, is there anything the United States could maybe take, maybe even as a cultural thing or as an idea from the European Union? Is there anything that you could think you could learn realistically, and maybe like a realistic one and an ideal one answer?
Ooh, that is a really, really good question. Anything we could learn, like you mean like anything,
And anything, but like, well,
Well,
we're talking
obviously,
about democracy,
right, right,
but
right. Okay,
if
got
you
it.
say we make very good, food, then you
Can,
say
can
that
it
too.
be? Can it be in relation to? I don't know if this is an acceptable answer, but I'm going to try.
Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I think that right now the United States could take any advice, any possible advice, and I think I wish a lot of our elected officials, and frankly, some Americans, would stop viewing the United States as like the only place in the world that exists.
Okay. Right. Yep.
Now, again, not to hate on Americans here, but anyways, but I'd say that look, right now, I scream about this often. There's a certain amount of ignorance that Americans have about democracy itself and
Yeah.
how uh, fundamental and important it is. I think that at least there is for a variety of reasons across the pond, as you said,
Yeah.
a much deeper understanding in places like this of how ugly things can get when
Sure.
democracy starts to erode. And I think for a lot of Americans, combining, young people being very involved right now with a lot of misinformation and disinformation flying, they simply lack the understanding of how fundamentally important this is. When, again, and I've talked to people who I say, democracy, our constitution, our democratic norms are being ripped apart. And they say, I don't care. Who cares? There's some amount of ignorance here where they don't
Is
they
it maybe apathy?
it might be apathy. I often say that I'm like it's like it's a combination of like apathy, our education system,
Right.
something that has brought rise to people who truly believe that whatever they're living right now is here to stay regardless of what happens. They're like,
Right.
well, screw it.
Right.
Democracy's never worked for me. Something else will be better. Donald Trump can be king forever, and I'll just keep living in this world where America's dominating and I have, I'm making money and everything's great.
Interesting.
There is some amount of just sheer ignorance about how important democracy is. And I
Right.
wish from even just being here, Americans would try it, but at least we could all up our education a bit to understand how important these things are. Is that an acceptable answer?
I think that's an acceptable
Okay.
answer. And maybe a bit more of a fun one that I also thought of exactly when you said it. User Villa Dish asks, could you ask him if he has seen how some in the Republican side have started saying that they do not support a democracy, but that instead they support a republic?
Oh my God. Yeah,
That we are not a democracy.
right.
Yeah.
This is like a constant thing. And again, when you talk about the misinformation war here, and a lot of the people in American politics right now are willing to do and say anything to win, to make money, to be close to Donald Trump.
Right.
And they know so often that they're lying or making shit up. So I often have this argument where, I'll put on TikTok, I'll put some like banner up that says like Donald Trump is ripping apart democracy, and people will come flood in and be like, "We're not a democracy, we're a republic."
Yeah, exactly.
So we're lacking like a ton of education here. Again, it goes back to like education, ignorance, the difference between something like a representative democracy and a constitutional republic, and how those are interchangeable
Yeah.
terms, and people just
One
again.
could fall under the
Yeah,
other. Yeah.
exactly. But right, and that's the problem is though most of those elected officials are they
Yeah.
know that
Yeah.
they're just again willing to say, you know what, this is working for our
Yeah.
base, something, something, something. Let's just pump it. It's insane. It drives me nuts.
Okay. Well, it's not my intention to drive you nuts as well in this interview.
No, I'm having
Yeah,
fun here.
yeah, yeah, very
I'm
good.
very passionate about this.
I mean, as you should. I believe it's important to be passionate about democracy. But maybe as a final thing, we always like to have give our guests the final word, so to say. Is there anything that you would like to say to our audience? Maybe just a general message into the future. I know it's been maybe a little bit pessimistic today,
Yeah.
but
Well, first I want to say, if you've been here for a while, I know I've seen some people in the chat
yeah,
over here. I appreciate you so much. And if you've just stumbled across this live stream, make sure you hit subscribe down below and like it. Maybe share it out to a friend. It helps boost the
you're doing our job for us.
no. You guys are literally the best. I also want to thank you for having me on, you guys. It's amazing. But make sure you share the stream. I'll say this last words as I said here again. There's so many Americans that are so incredibly passionate about um, fixing this mess. We just had arguably one of the biggest protest days in American history, and the
Yep.
No King's Day. And so just know that there are a lot of people fighting relentlessly against Donald Trump and his current BS we're seeing, and him cozying up with dictators.
Right.
And so many of us that understand so deeply that this is fundamentally not who we are as a country. And so just, I guess, a little bit of hope. We're fighting hard. And right now, we actually have, I'd say, momentum that we haven't had in a long time. We have a little bit of hope in this. I know it sounds weird, but a little bit of hope right now that we haven't felt in a while. I promise, whether you're in the United States or not, that if we keep fighting one day at a time for the values we care about, we will get through this. We will get through this time. We will get to a better one. So that's what I'd say.
And with those words, I would like to thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you. I really appreciate it. It was great. Again, if you
Good talk.
haven't, hit like and share the stream down
Exactly.
below.
Share.
Do it.
I'm looking at you. I'm looking
I'm
at you right now.
I believe it. Thank you so
Sure,
much,
sure.
man. I appreciate it.
Right. You can turn it on to the thank you for watching. Is there already?